is Matt Deadman. I'm a 2001 Carroll graduate from the Madison area originally. Went to Carroll right out of high school because it was close to home. I could run cross country there. I was a communications minor. And then after working in the, real world for maybe 10, 15 years after my undergraduate graduation, started my MBA program and got my MBA from UW-Whitewater in 2019 and have been in the real estate industry for about 8 years now. Right out of college, I did a couple odd jobs, ran a coffee shop, was in banking for a number of years, and just wasn't feeling fulfilled, if you will. I had worked with a number of realtors and knew I could do their job just as well as they could. So took the plunge about 8, 9 years ago, and here we are. Um, so got into real estate in 2016. I started with Keller Williams, who's a national brokerage. When you start out in real estate, you have to work underneath a company. You can't just be your own boss right away, despite what some of the shows on TV show, Selling Sunset and whatnot. But I started with Keller Williams. There's all sorts of brokerages out there. There's Shore West, Realty Executives, First Weber. They all offer great things. After a couple of years, I worked at a small Madison boutique brokerage, and then that whole brokerage actually switched into a national, multinational company called Real Broker, who I'm with right now. In my career, I've sold about 250 million or 250 homes, about 75 million in sales, and won a number of awards here in the Madison area. So yeah, so let's talk about the home buying process. So home buying is very scary if you've never done it before. It's even scary for some people that have done it before because it's intimidating. It's the largest purchase you'll ever make. You don't know the steps. You don't know the process, and it's in the news right now. Actually, this process is assuming the old traditional way of doing things. It might very well change come November. I don't know if anyone's seen, but the National Association of Realtors just settled this billion-dollar lawsuit with a bunch of sellers who sued them for commission tampering. And so this might change a little bit, but as it is right now, and hopefully how it is moving forward, I think this is most advantageous to first-time buyers. This is a general process. There's what I like to break down is a strategy step. There's a search step. There's a contract to close step. So when you actually have a property under contract, and then there's a closing step. So those are kind of the four steps. You as the buyer don't have to be an expert in any of these. You don't have to necessarily know what comes next. That's the role of your realtor, to walk you through that and to keep you on track. And so the first step is deciding to buy a home. I think that this is really one of the most important steps because at some point in your life, you realize I don't want to, for a variety of reasons, pay rent anymore. I want to own my own home. And so I think of it almost like a physical decision. I am going to buy a house. Of course, a lot comes after that decision, but some of the tips that I think of when you ultimately decide to buy a home are think about why you want to own a home. Some people just think of it as the next step. Some of it, people think of it as the American dream. Some people want to own their own piece of the pie. And to also think about how long you plan to stay in the current location. Maybe it doesn't make sense to buy a home if you're only going to be there for a couple months or a year. But if you plan on planting roots down, or plan on being there for several years, and it probably makes sense, much more so than if you're not going to be there for the long term. Next step is arranging financing. And I kind of have step two and step three are interchangeable. Next step is, of course, meet with a realtor and choose a realtor. But um, arranging financing is a very important next step because this tells you how much you are approved for. Um, Believe it or not, you don't have to spend every penny that you're approved for. One thing that I've noticed in this generation, in the younger generation, younger than I am, is that they're very budget conscious. They're very smart with their money, much more so than even my own generation. And I think part of that is what got us into the 2008 uh, uh, housing crisis and the economy, going under in 2008. My generation, if you approved us for a $500,000 loan, we were going to spend $499,999. And what I've seen is younger generations are much smarter about what they want to spend money on. They might be approved for 500,000, but they maybe are only comfortable spending 400,000 or even 350,000. So that is definitely a tip that I have when getting financed is you don't have to spend your maximum amount. Also, it's not always about interest rate. Of course, interest rates are very important, but you want to be conscious of what closing costs are. You want to be conscious of if your lender will sell the loan or if they're going to retain the loan. Um, you want to be conscious of how you'll make payments. Some lenders only let you pay online. Depending on where you go, you might be able to actually go into a physical office and meet with someone, put in an application in person. Another tip I didn't write down here, but shop around. It's the not all lenders are created equal. Just because you bank somewhere doesn't mean you have to necessarily go there. There's lots of great lenders, and there's lots of great loan options. So getting your financing ducks in a row is one of the first steps, so you know exactly what you're approved for and how much you can spend.
Matt, I have just a quick question
Yeah,
on the finance side that you might be covering later, so feel free to just say it's coming up. But when someone is looking at a house and they start thinking about their, how much they want to get a loan for, what is the typical down payment size? Just because I think that's something worth noting so that people kind of understand how much money they'll need up front.
absolutely. Um, there is no specific down payment amount. Certainly, the younger someone is, the less of a down payment they've been able to save for. I mean, it just makes sense. If you've only been in the workforce for a couple of years, you maybe haven't accumulated, um, a huge savings account. So, really, you can purchase homes with as little as 3% down. Using a, say, $300,000 home example, that would be $9,000 for a down payment. There are other loan types where you don't have to put any money down. VA loans or veteran loans require 0% down. In the quote unquote olden days, or our parents taught us that you had to put 20% down on a house, and that's just not true. You don't need 20% down. You get a little better loan product, and you don't have to pay uh, private mortgage insurance if you put 20% or more down, but you can still get a great loan with quote unquote only 3% down.
Awesome. Thank you.
So then the next process in the strategy session is hiring a realtor. And I would recommend doing your due diligence when hiring a realtor. Interview multiple people, interview a couple agents, ask friends and family for referrals, and read reviews. I'm big on Google. I'm big on keeping my Google profile up to date. And I ask all my past clients to review me on Google because then new clients can come in and see what other people have said about me, what it's like working with me. Um, don't just take the first recommendation or just like lenders are not all created equal, not all realtors are created equal as well. So you'll be spending a lot of time with this individual. You'll need to trust this individual. It's important that you like working with them, that you get along with them, and most importantly, that you trust that person. So certainly don't skimp on this step, or certainly don't um, shortchange yourself and just take the first person you see. And then the next step in the search phase of buying a home is actually starting a search. And what I always like to recommend to my clients is don't search outside your price range. If your eyes are only this big, don't set them to be too big. Because of course, if you're looking at homes that are outside your range, you're not going to be satisfied when you look at smaller homes or less expensive homes. So if you can only afford or only want to spend, I should say, 300,000, don't look at homes that are worth 400,000 because then when you go back and settle on a $300,000 home, you're not going to be as satisfied, or you'll have buyer's remorse. Um, have a list of must-haves and can't-haves. Um, make a list of what's important to you in a house, and you may not know. I always tell my buyers that the more homes they look through, the better. Um, certainly they can, and I have had clients buy the first home they see or the first home they put in an offer on, but they will feel much more confident about their decision if they've fully vetted and fully screened a variety of different homes. Look at two stories, look at ranch homes, look at homes with finished basements, look at homes that don't have finished basements, look at multi-level homes, bi-level homes. Look at homes with detached garages, attached garages. Really determine what are deal breakers for you and what aren't. Maybe it's just because we're coming out of winter, but a lot of my buyers lately have been talking. When I meet with them, they tell me a must-have is an attached garage. So no more, parking the car outside and having to scrape it in the winter. Um, the last tip I have down there is know what percentage you will settle for. Um, this might come across as a little harsh, but I don't believe the perfect home, especially for a first-time buyer, is out there. A home that's going to check every single box for you. So, if you have 10 boxes that you're looking for, will you settle for having seven of those checked, 70%? Will you settle for having eight of those checked? Um, if you have to have all 10 of those boxes checked for you to be happy, well, it's gonna be a difficult home search. So the lower that percentage is, and I'm not saying settle, I'm not saying buy the first thing you see, whether you like it or not, but the lower you are willing to go with the number of boxes that your home checks, the easier your search will be. Does that make sense? I'm not encouraging anyone to settle per se, but lower expectations, especially your first time. And then as you get more experience, as you get more um, equity in your home, your next home you can be a little pickier on. All right. Next step in the search phase of home buying is to actually tour homes. And this is one of the more enjoyable steps in the whole process is actually going through homes. Um, I ask all my clients, how many homes have you been through in your life? And a lot. They always answer a high number. Um, Going through a home, though, with the intention of potentially buying it is a different experience than just walking through a friend's home or going to a neighbor's house to have dinner at their house. Going to a house with the intention of potentially buying it is different. You're looking for different things. You're examining different things. You're seeing how you feel in that house. So certainly, I expect and I encourage my buyers to open drawers, open closets, and also try to see beyond the clutter. I do tell my sellers make it as minimalist as possible, but not every seller does. Some sellers have lots of clutter, lots of furniture, lots of personal pictures. If you can see beyond that, great. That will certainly help you in the process. And if you also can, come back for a second tour. In years past, it's been a very strong seller's market, and sometimes buyers were only getting the opportunity to see a home one time. Um, they'd only get the opportunity in a quick 20, I even saw 15-minute tours during the height of COVID when no one wanted people in their houses and there was, 60 tours on every home. You don't sometimes only get like a 15-minute time slot and you'd be expected to make a life-changing biggest financial decision of your life in 15 minutes, and that's just not reasonable. So I always say if you can, tour it, sleep on the decision, and then come back a second time, either with a second tour or an open house. And you'll see all sorts of different things the second time around. And also drive around the neighborhood, see what the neighborhood's like, see what the neighbors are like. See where the amenities are that are important to you. If it's important to you to be able to walk places, see what coffee shops are around. This again in the olden days, you could we could set up tours of 5, 6, 7 homes on a weekend and go knock them all out. And it was a several hour thing. Nowadays, there's such low inventory. There's so few homes on market that home tours are kind of one-offs. A home comes on the market, you go look at that home. Uh, and then that might be the only home you see with your buyers on a particular weekend because no other homes meet their criteria or no other homes in their price range came on the market. So in the olden days, the good old days, there was full tours where you'd see 5, 6, 7 at a time, and you really get to experience house hunting. Now with such low inventory, it's kind of just again one-offs. Any questions so far?
Do you see like starter homes being built anymore, or are they just like these huge, large houses?
Yeah. Uh, Unfortunately, I don't see starter homes it's kind of a double-edged question. Number one is they're not building a lot of starter homes. They're building condos, which are great because condos are in many cases less expensive than homes, but they're not building them, at least in Madison, nearly as much as they're building apartments. They're building apartments left and right. They're building some condos, and they're building practically no starter homes. It's really unfortunate. Um, and with that, the largest generation of homeowners right now is our baby boomers. And many baby boomers, not all, many baby boomers are staying in their homes. Their generation was such that they weren't constantly upgrading or they weren't constantly moving into larger homes. So they might be, in their starter home for 50, 60 years. Heck, my grandparents were in their starter home for 60 years. And then they passed away, and then that house came on the market. But um, a lot of the quote unquote starter homes, the smaller homes, the less expensive homes, are being held by um, either corporations, which is a whole other topic, or they're being held by baby boomers that just aren't ready to sell and uh, won't sell until they either pass or go into a nursing home. But there should be when they do, there should be hopefully a large influx of inventory.
Thank you.
Yeah. Um, so now we're in the making the offer step. And the making the offer step, I enjoy because this is really where I can provide value to my client, my buyer. Um, Obviously, I think I provide value the whole time, but in making the offer, the Wisconsin offer to purchase is an 11-page document. And I really pride myself on going over the entire document with my client. I don't necessarily require that they're an expert in the whole thing, but I want them to feel comfortable with what they're offering, what terms they're offering. And I want them to feel not only comfortable with it, but that they can explain it. There's lots of legalities in it, and there's lots of real estate jargon, and they don't necessarily have to be an expert on it. But as long as they're comfortable with, yes, I know what I offered and I'm comfortable making that offer, I'm happy with it. A few tips I have when you're making an offer is number one, know how many offers you're competing against. If there are no other offers, that's an entirely different scenario than if there are 10 offers on the table. This past weekend, I wrote an offer for a client. There was 13 other offers on the table. So it undoubtedly got pretty crazy. Um, I also recommend having multiple offers ready. There have been times where I've written more than one offer for a client. I've written an offer assuming no competition. I've written an offer assuming two or three other offers, and I've written an offer for the same client for the same house, assuming lots of competition. And each offer got progressively stronger and stronger. If you're not competing against any other offers, maybe you don't have to offer them as strong of an offer as you would if you were competing against 10, 13, 15 other offers. So depending on how many offers you're competing with determines how strong you need to make your own offer. And then also know what items are important to the seller. Again, we're in a strong seller's market right now. The sellers have a lot of control in this negotiation. And if the sellers say something is important to them, like closing on June 3rd, then by golly, try to make closing June 3rd a priority. Or if the seller says it's important to them to rent back to live in the house after closing for a couple days so that they can slowly get stuff moved out of the house, then maybe offer them to do that. So have your realtor reach out to the other realtor to see what's important to the sellers. All right, moving into the contract to close step. So this is a step after you have an accepted offer. And this is when the fun starts also. I like to say that my job is a matchmaker when someone is looking for a house. Uh, and then once they find a house, I'm a wedding planner. So up until they find the house, I'm a matchmaker. I'm helping them find dates. I'm helping them go on dates and look for potential spouses. And then when they find someone they want to marry, then my job moves into more logistical wedding planning and making sure all the T's get crossed and I's get dotted, and making sure all the dates are met. So the first step in the contract to close period is sending earnest money. And what earnest money is it's basically like a security deposit where you're letting the seller know that you're serious about going forward with the transaction. It's usually, oftentimes in Wisconsin, it's about 1% of the purchase price. So if the purchase price is $300,000, it might be $3,000. And it's money that you give the seller's firm. The seller doesn't get to keep it, but you give the listing brokerage and they hold on to it. And then if the contract goes to closing, it gets applied to your down payment. So it's not like lost money. It's not money that you never see again. If the contract goes to closing, it gets applied to your down payment. If it doesn't go to closing, if you just walk away from the deal, then you likely lose the earnest money. If the deal doesn't go to closing because of a contingency, say you can't get the loan or the inspection finds too many bad items, then it's negotiable. But this is a negotiable aspect of the offer to purchase. And tips I have are get it out as soon as possible, because if you don't get it if you don't submit it in the time frame, you're in breach of contract, and also to get a receipt for it. The next steps after you have an accepted offer are to perform the inspection and to perform the appraisal. The good thing about the appraisal is that's actually handled by the lender. The lender you decide to work with will take care of having the appraisal ordered. And what the appraisal is when the lender has a licensed state appraiser go look at the property and determine what the true value of the property is. The reason the lender does this is because they don't want to lend you more money than the house is worth. So for example, if you are buying a house for $300,000 and the bank has it appraised and the appraiser says, well, this house is only worth $200,000. Well, then there's a problem there, because if worst case scenario, you go bankrupt and the bank takes possession of the house, they gave you a loan for 300,000, but they can only sell that house for 200,000. So the bank is going to lose money in that situation. So banks will only lend you up to how much the house is worth. So that's why an appraisal is an important part of the contract close period. But again, you don't have to necessarily worry about the details of the appraisal. The lender will take care of that. What you as the buyer do have to take care of is hiring an inspector. And I always give my buyers 3 or 4 names of local inspectors that I work with a lot that I recommend. What an inspection is um, it's an individual that goes through the house and looks at basically every nook and cranny and everything mechanical and everything electrical and everything plumbing related associated with the house to make sure everything's functional. They'll check all the electrical outlets, they'll check all the windows, they'll usually, if they can, if it's not snowy, they'll walk on the roof to make sure the roof's in good shape. I see a lot of them with little gas gauges. They'll check the furnace to make sure it's not leaking gas. It's really a great tool, if for nothing else, and to just kind of show you how the house works. Um, my tips are, again, like realtors, look at reviews and ratings when hiring an inspector. Don't just hire the first person. Hire someone that's been around, that's done a lot of inspections, and also don't freak out. There's no house issue that can't be, for the most part, can't be resolved with some form of money, some form of credit, or some form of repair. Um, and so you as the buyer fell in love with the house for a reason. It'll be up to your realtor to negotiate with the seller to come to some remedy to get whatever issue it is replaced or fixed to your satisfaction.
Matt, I know back in 2020 and even maybe today, a lot of the negotiation strategies were to waive an inspection as a buyer. Is that
Mhm.
still something that you're seeing in today's market?
Yes, unfortunately, it is something that I see. And it makes sense. If you're a seller, you want the least resistance possible. And the inspection just brings out a lot of unknowns. I mean, there's a lot of unknown and a lot of risk with the inspection. So if you have 10 offers and one of them is willing to not do an inspection, well, that one looks a lot more attractive than all the ones with inspections. Um, on the flip side of that, especially first-time home buyers, I highly recommend getting an inspection. Um, Again, if for no other reason than just to see how your house works. Um, I have a client who she has an inspection tomorrow. Now, her um, her compromise with wanting to have an inspection, but also wanting to have a competitive offer is she told the seller that she gave the seller a buffer for repairs. So she said, I will not ask for any repairs up to X thousand dollars. So that way the seller knows that she's not going to nickel and dime the seller, or she's not going to ask the seller for every small minor defect to be fixed. I mean, because the inspector will undoubtedly find issues. Not having a smoke alarm in every single room is a defect. And you could ask the seller to add smoke alarms if you find that. So if you give the seller a buffer and tell them you're not going to ask for repairs up to a certain amount, that can be a strategy to have the peace of a mind of an inspection, but also let the seller know you're not gonna try and rake them over the coals.
Awesome. And how much does an inspection usually cost?
Great question. Inspections are usually about $400, $500. Um, Unlike the appraisal, which is paid usually at closing, the inspection is paid at the time of the inspection. All right. So you have the inspection, you have the appraisal. Um, Based on the inspection and the appraisal, that's when you negotiate contingencies. And I use the example of the smoke alarms. Say you have an inspection and they find that there are no smoke alarms in the whole house. That is covered under, if you have a full inspection contingency, that is covered under the contract. And so you negotiate with the seller to remedy that smoke alarm issue. Maybe there's 4 bedrooms, so there's supposed to be 4 smoke alarms, and you tell the seller, hey, give us all 4, and they say, we'll only do 2 smoke alarms. That could be a negotiation. Oftentimes it's more complex than that. There's several electrical issues in the house or something, and you have to negotiate having a electrician out to fix those, or you have to negotiate coming up with a credit that to take care of that after closing. But that's all part of the negotiation. I always like to say for tips, look for a win-win. It doesn't have to be um, uh, annihilation of the other side as the buyer. You don't have to annihilate the seller. Again, you love the house. They want to get rid of the house. How can we make this happen? But with that said, also know when to walk away. If you find out that the roof has to be replaced and the seller is not being reasonable or the seller is not willing to compromise at all, know when to walk away. And this is where the trust with your real estate agent comes into effect. Hopefully you trust and have a competent realtor who's willing to let you know when it makes sense to walk away too. Any questions on contingencies or the contract to close period? All right. So then the last step is the finalize financing. So at some point in the process, you'll get through all the contingencies and you're just waiting for the loan to be fully approved. And this can be somewhat of a weird concept for people to understand because they think, well, what do you mean I have to finalize financing? I went to the bank, they gave me a pre-approval letter. What do you mean I can't buy the house? Well, the lender has to actually match up that specific house to your finances. And they have to approve you for that specific house. So pre-approval is just a general, based on the information you're telling us, we should be willing to approve you for this. But finalizing the financing is a final and deep dive into your finances, into your tax returns. For tips, I always tell my clients do not switch jobs during the home buying process because that will throw a wrench in everything. The lender is going to ask you for a lot of information, pay stubs, tax returns, letters that allow them to talk to your employer. Get that to them as soon as possible. And also don't take out any additional debt. I've heard horror stories of, people buying a new car the week of closing, and that disqualifies them for getting a loan. You know, until you sign on the dotted line, nothing is final yet. So, during the whole contract to close and all the way to the closing period. Try not to do anything that affects your income or your credit. And then the next step in the actual closing process is to finalize moving logistics. And this can happen a few weeks before closing. You want to make sure that you have moving set up. You want to make sure that you have, if you're coming from a lease, that you have that ended and that you've talked to your landlord and they have you uh, um, all set to move out. You want to switch over cable internet, electric. There might be some last minute things the lender needs, like setting up insurance. You want to make sure that insurance is set up when you move into the new house. And then, oops, this is not. And the next step is in the closing process, closing step is to perform the final walkthrough. And this is oftentimes done the morning of closing, but in Wisconsin, it can legally be done up to 3 days prior to close. And it's basically your opportunity to walk through the house to make sure that nothing has materially changed since you made the offer to purchase. Usually it's done the morning of because you want to make sure the seller has all their stuff out of the house. You want to make sure the house is clean relatively. You want to make sure the house is empty and has all of the seller's items out of it. And you want to make sure that if the seller promised to fix something, like give you 2 smoke alarms or install 2 smoke alarms, they did that. So this is an opportunity to just make sure that the house is ready to be moved into. Um, I have plenty of horror stories here of going to final walkthroughs and either the house isn't clean or the seller hasn't moved things out or so this is a very important step in the process. But assuming that you do the final walkthrough before closing, the day of closing, you then go to the closing, or oftentimes it's called settlement. And settlement is typically happens at the title company. The title company is a business that their job is to legally transfer ownership of land from one owner to another. So there's all sorts of title companies around town. Before I got into real estate, I didn't necessarily notice them, but now I am. They stick out all over the place. Here in Madison, there's First American Title. I know they're national. There's Preferred Title. There's Nightberry Title. I'm trying to think of some of the ones I've worked with in the Milwaukee area. But there's tons of different title companies, and their job is to allow the seller to transfer the ownership into the buyer's name. Um, and usually the settlement is done in one room with the buyer and sellers together. Although some counties do it differently. Some counties might have the seller sit in one room and sign all their paperwork, and the buyer sit in one room and sign all their paperwork. But I prefer it when both sides are together, because then, the sellers are excited to get rid of the house. The buyers are excited to buy the house. They can talk about, neighbors. They can talk about what day is trash day. And, it just makes it a little easier transition. My tips for this settlement are to review as much of the paperwork ahead of time as possible. About half of the paperwork is from your lender. And so your lender should be able to provide a lot of it ahead of time to review at least. And about half the paperwork is legal, county, deed type paperwork. So review as much of it as you can ahead of time. Sign as much of the paperwork as as you can ahead of time, and also celebrate. It's a festive time, especially as first time buyers. You're a homeowner during this step, and so a lot of times there'll be champagne at these at closings. And then the next step is the last step in the home buying process is move. I have a picture here of my moving truck. Not many realtors have trucks, but there's always U-Hauls, and then there's always companies that will do it. My tips are have friends lined up to help. Know when to hire help. Especially at my age, being, mid 40s, I don't want to help friends move for some pizza and beer. When you're in your 20s, you can bribe your friends and say, "Hey, I'll give you pizza and beer afterwards." But, I don't want to risk slipping a disc or, throwing out my back for some pizza or beer. So if it's much more than a few boxes, hire help. It's not too crazy expensive. Um, and also a tip is to have some overlap between the old place and new place. Nothing worse, especially for people that are selling homes, to, you know, close on your sale and have everything you own, all your earthly possessions in a moving truck, and then go to your purchase closing. Um, Preferably, if you can have a few days to slowly move things from your old house or from your old lease into your new place, the better. So that, oops, I guess my slide asking for questions didn't save, but yeah, that's a presentation on buying a home with some of the steps as I see it. Um, Emma or Maddie, do you have questions?
I have a couple. First, thank you for doing this because this is an extraordinarily daunting process, and obviously the biggest purchase that I've ever made.
Yeah.
And I feel really appreciative to have this forum to feel comfortable to ask some of these questions. So, um, and not feel like I'm asking dumb questions. So,
Yeah.
um, to
You've
go
never
back.
done this before. I always tell my buyers, you've never done this before. So there is
Right.
no dumb. When you're spending 200, 300, $400,000, there isn't such thing as a dumb question because it's a lot of money.
So, I know you had mentioned knowing how many offers you're competing with. Is
Mhm.
that actually something you can ask your realtor to find out? Is that something typically that's transparent?
Yes and no.
Okay.
They can tell you how many offers they have. They cannot tell you any details of the offer. So
Mhm.
they can't tell you that there's an offer that's 5 grand over asking price, or they can't tell you that there's an offer without an inspection. But from what I've seen, the more offers you're competing with against, the crazier the potential competition is.
That's good to know that you can find out how many, it's just to ballpark.
Yeah. And from a seller perspective, they want as much competition as possible. So
Mhm.
I will happily tell my the other agents, hey, you're competing against two or three other offers. You better bring me a great offer. Because I know that if there's no competition, the offer won't be as strong.
And then you had said to know what's important to the seller. If
Mhm.
the seller is not working with the same realtor that you are a real brokerage,
Mhm.
is that something that's typically the realtor is able to find out?
Absolutely. It's same as how many offers you're dealing with. The
Okay.
selling agent um, may or may not be working for the same brokerage, but their job is the same nonetheless, and that's to sell the home. So I'll happily tell anyone what is important to my buyer because At the end of the day, I want to get them the best offer possible. I want to get it to them under the terms that they want, and that involves communication. So
No, thank you. That's really helpful. And then the other miscellaneous question was just, yes, I am finding low inventory as well. And just, do you have any thoughts on the current market? I mean, I know you don't have a crystal ball to predict what's to come, but just from your experience in the field and or advice with a low inventory market.
yeah, so there are all sorts of different ways that you can proactively that an agent can proactively find homes. And this is really where agents will earn their money, especially moving forward in this NAR lawsuit environment where there people are saying realtors don't really provide value. Well, if agents can provide you houses when there aren't houses, that is absolutely providing value. So I I always look at homes that are not on the market yet, homes that are in at least in the South Central Wisconsin, Madison area, we have what's called delayed listings. So they're not on the market yet. They're not on Zillow. They're not on realtor.com, but agents can see them. And so I send those to my clients that are looking. And in fact, we're closing on one. They wrote an offer without even seeing it. Um, so they knew it was exactly where they want to be. They knew the general idea of the house, the specifics of the house, and they wrote an offer contingent on walking through the house. So they still got the final, say of whether they wanted it or not. But it's called a sight unseen offer. So it was a coming soon house. Other people, no one else had walked through the house, and we wrote the seller an offer. Of course, it needed to be a strong offer. It couldn't be a just normal asking price offer. But that was a way to materialize a listing so that my buyer didn't have to compete. Um, I've written letters to condo associations, to all the owners of a condo building before, when I had buyers that wanted to be in a specific condo area. Sorry, let me turn the light on. I didn't realize how dark it got here. I've door knocked in specific neighborhoods. It's any realtor can find you homes that are on Zillow. It's the realtors that can find you homes and get you homes not on Zillow that are worth their salary. And so, pushing your realtor to, help find you homes that aren't necessarily available to everyone. That's one way to deal with this low inventory environment.
Did you say that was called delayed market?
Delayed
Delayed market.
listings.
Okay. Um, and just one quick follow-up question. I've heard of this. Do you actually see this because of the low inventory? If people have a specific area that they really want to live in, like a school district, something like that, going and like if you see a house from the outside that looks, to be maybe you would definitely want a ranch or whatever it is, people writing letters to those home buyers saying, if you're ever interested in putting your house on the market, I would be interested. Do you actually see that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I received one of those letters in our neighborhood a few months ago. It it can work, and I've heard, I haven't seen them move in yet, but I think that couple that wrote us a letter ended up buying a house in our neighborhood. So that absolutely can work. Absolutely.
Okay. No, thank you.
Yeah.
This was
Well,
awesome.
yeah, thank you so much, Matt, for walking us through this process. It's definitely a scary one the first time, and like you said at the beginning, even the second or third, because it is such a high dollar purchase and really something that you got to think about. And when today's market, you don't always have the time to think about it. So
Right.
um, it's great to have kind of this foundation for first-time home buyers or other home buyers to reflect on and to have agents like you out there that are ready to help people find their home is so great. So thank you so much for offering your expertise and sharing your knowledge with us.